Welcome, everybody, back to the Shameless Picture Show, podcast picture show, where your two happening co-hosts, Michael Vyers and Nick Richards, discuss films that one of us has never seen before, even though we should, and we are filled with shame about it.
Shame!
Today's episode is probably the truest to the concept of the traditional idea of the shame list. We've done a lot of films where people have said, yeah, but why are you ashamed that you've never seen that before? Where Gone with the Wind is a classic. This is clearly a film that nearly everyone has heard of, if not seen. The inspiration for this episode was I was going back and listening to some of our back episodes, and in one of the early ones, Michael mentioned that one of his mom's favorite movies was Gone with the Wind, and he had never seen it before. So we thought, since, as of the point that we're recording this, yesterday was Mother's Day, so this is our Mother's Day special, where we go in and check out Gone with the Wind. It is a very long film. We have a lot of I'll be very interested to see what the runtime is on this episode.
40 minutes, probably. It's probably going to be our shortest episode.
There's not really much content in Gone with the Wind. It's just a big song and dance number, right?
Yeah.
But I think with that, welcome to the studio, and let's get the podcast started.
This part could be cut out. I just want to point this out. Like, one of my... it's a joke that I used in my first solo episode, and I really wish I came up with it because I find it really amusing. But, like, my intro for my solo episode was, I'm live from the studio apartment. And I stole it from another podcast, so I can't use it.
You did give credit when you used it.
I did, and joke's on them because I'm not in a studio apartment, nor am I live. All right.
Pre-recorded in a two-bedroom ensuite.
And you're actually in a studio, so that's kind of impressive.
I am in a legit studio.
That first episode was pretty impressive. When I got to, I saw my face on one screen, and then I saw like GarageBand on the big screen. I was like, oh, that's impressive. But anyways, I'll introduce the audio portion of this show. Episode of the Shameless Picture Show. I'm Michael Vyers, and with me is the embodiment of Rhett Butler,
Nick Richards.
Fiddle-dee-dee. On today's special Mother's Day episode, we'll be discussing David O. Selznick's production of Gone with the Wind. Adapted from the best-selling novel by Margaret Mitchell, this large-scale epic film tells the 12-year story of young Scarlett O'Hara and her journey from naive adolescent before the Civil War to independent matriarch as she pulls herself up from the rubble of her ruined life after the Civil War. Along for the journey every step of the way is suave, handsome Rhett Butler. He's mysterious and charming, she's manipulative and beautiful, and their love is turbulent. Gone with the Wind is now considered to be one of the greatest and most important films of all time, and while the production was challenging, it'll always be remembered as the pinnacle for Hollywood at the time. The film stars Vivien Leah, Clark Gable, Thomas Mitchell, and Hattie McDaniel, and was directed by a slew of names, Victor Fleming being the most prominent.
Gone with the Wind has captured the imagination and acclaim of the entire world. The screen has never known a love story to compare with this, when Rhett Butler meets Scarlett O'Hara.
I love you more than I've ever loved any woman. And I've waited longer for you than I've ever waited for any woman.
Let me alone.
Kiss me once.
Can't we ever forget that day at 12 Oaks?
Do you think I could ever forget it? Have you forgotten it? Can you honestly say you don't love me?
No, I don't love you.
It's a lie.
Well, even if it is a lie, do you think I'd go off and leave Melanie and the baby?
I'm not cornered. And you'll never corner me, Rhett Butler, or frighten me. You've lived in dirt so long you can't understand anything else. And you're jealous of something you can't understand. Good night.
It's not that easy, Scarlett. You turned me out while you chased Ashley Wilkes, while you dreamed of Ashley Wilkes. This is one night you're not turning me out.
A love affair you'll remember as long as you live, filled with all the fire and fury of the times in which it happened. Gone with the Wind. First picture to win 10 Academy Awards. The most honored, the most talked about motion picture in all film history.
Nice.
Yeah, that it took me a while to get that just right.
You're boiling a lot down. See, I would have went with something a little more succinct, which would have gone straight to the spirit of, I think, what the film is Scarlett O'Hara abuses a horse to death, and then all of horsekind comes back to kill everyone that she loves. It's really an animal-based slasher film.
Well, I had never quite saw it that way. Speaking of that scene, when I was watching this with Amanda, I think she had just gotten back to Tara, and she whips the horse one more time, and it just fucking collapses. And she goes, "She killed the horse? The horse died?" And I was like, "No, baby, it's just sleeping."
It's going off to a farm to live somewhere. Doesn't that sound nice?
Yeah, doesn't that sound nice?
And then horses kill everyone that she loves.
Yeah, I imagine that's really just the allegory for the Civil War right there. It's really horses. It's the South versus horses. Oh. So neither of us have seen Gone with the Wind, right? This is a first for both of us?
I have.
Oh, you've seen Gone with the Wind.
It has been a while, and I certainly I was probably in my early 20s when I first saw it and did not have the perspective that I have on it now.
No, I get that.
So I still garnered a great deal from it.
No, I get that. And I feel like I saw bits and pieces of this movie growing up, and then I always heard my mother speaking about it, whom this episode is dedicated to. But I never wanted to watch it, and it's honestly because I was convinced, because the little parts I did see, that it was just going to be a big chamber piece movie with people in fine dresses sitting around talking about romance and
it is not that.
No, it starts off that way, and the first 15 minutes I was like, oh, this movie. But it grew on me, and I've got conflicting opinions about the movie. I think I described it to a friend of mine recently, actually my former host of the No Homers podcast, Nico. I was talking to him about it because he had just recently watched it for the first time. And I said to him, my feelings about it were that it was a very good, if not great at times, movie that had more scope and more heart than any other film at the time, while some of the content was questionable. And it's a very bold choice for 1939 to have in my opinion, very unlikable lead character, but with motivation why you saw why she was so unlikable.
There aren't a whole lot of likable characters in the film.
No, not really. I honestly like Clark Gable is probably the most likable, and even he was an ass until the third act.
And I hate to we always tend to do a very tangenty approach to these film analyses, and this one is so dense that might be problematic. But what you just said reminded me of a thought that I had last night. By the way, for those who haven't seen it, this movie is 4 hours long.
Yeah, it is.
It is.
Oh, that's not.
It is very long.
Actually, no, that is including an overture, exit music, an intermission, and a end of intermission. There's actually music to signal that the intermission is over.
So I watched it last night, finishing it at 2 a.m. this morning.
Woo!
But anyway, we were talking about Rhett. I find it... There's this point where Scarlett, falls in love with Rhett, stops using him for his money and security, and actually falls in love with him. And it seems to be the night of drunken abuse that ended presumably in sex and not necessarily totally consensual.
Yeah.
I had a that speaks to what you were saying about the questionable content. There is no point where you feel good about the actions of any of these characters in the film. It may be scattered. Every once in a while you're like, oh wait, maybe there's hope that they're not going to totally ruin their lives. Made a good decision.
What was totally weird about that scene, though, for me at least, was that the next morning she seemed really
she was so happy.
Yeah.
Whistling. Mammy comes in and she's, oh, what are you so happy about? Well, my husband abused me and now I'm in love.
And then even when she it was the moment where, yeah, this is going to jump all over the place. And if you haven't watched this movie, don't listen to this episode because we're going to give everything away. The very last scene that we see Rhett, and Ashley had just broken it off with her, pretty much told her, this is never happening, Scarlett. And she's like, oh, I guess I do love Rhett. And it's that's what it finally took for you to realize you've questionable at times, but you've had a realistically good man who was going to take care of you. Even when he talked about divorcing her, he was going to take care of her.
Yeah. And I don't know that I'd describe him as a good man.
Well, maybe not a good man, but
he was going to take care of her because he loved her. But there was a lot of that was a loaded relationship on both sides.
He was a questionable man. Good father, it seemed like. But he definitely cared more about their child than she did.
Yeah. Well, I think for Scarlett, for Rhett, and he flat out says this, their daughter was, for him, Scarlett in child form, innocent, and something that he could channel all of his affection and love into because he couldn't channel it into Scarlett. For Scarlett, I think their daughter was a reminder that, once again, she has married somebody that she has no real feelings for. And that she has serious issues with. Some of the other ones, at least they were gentle, and there wasn't the same kind of emotional abuse that she had with Rhett. So, I mean, had she not been cruelly murdered by a horse seeking revenge, that kid was going to have a lot of therapy.
Yeah, and it's funny, you talk about her first two husbands who were gentle, the first one, he was so gentle that when he died in war, he didn't even die from getting shot. He died from two illnesses.
They made a point in that letter to say, not an honorable war death. he died of pneumonia, I think.
And measles.
And measles.
And then, like, her second husband, while he wasn't emotionally abusing him, she was kind of emotionally. No, he wasn't emotionally abusing her. She was kind of emotionally abusing him.
Oh,
and
absolutely.
He completely died because of her.
Yep.
This is a deep and dark movie.
Oh, yeah. I think kind of by the end of it, I summarized my take on the film as all the major players here, particularly Scarlett and Rhett, are trying to own things and in particular people. I think there's a reason why they never develop why Scarlett loves, air quote around loves, Ashley the way that she does.
Yeah.
It's enough that her actions over the course of this 4-hour film, up until the last 10 minutes, everything she does it so she can have Ashley.
Yeah.
But why? There's not this setup in the beginning that establishes, oh, he's so amazing, that's why I love him, or why do I have these feelings? She just decided, I love him, probably because she couldn't have him.
Yeah.
She could have any man except that one.
They make reference to the fact that, like, in that little chamber scene in the library with Ashley and Scarlett at the beginning, that they might have had something a couple years prior, if not shortly before Ashley got together with Melanie. But no,
they were courting.
Realistically, it just seemed like he wasn't available and was the only guy who, in his own way, wasn't swooning over her.
Right.
Like the way that the other guys were. Like, we find out through the course of it that, like, he's definitely it's Ashley's the hardest one to read because I can't figure out his intentions, but, like, at least to the extent of, he might have interest in Scarlett, but not in the way that everyone else does, where, like, anyone else, Scarlett says hi, and they immediately walk away from their women, and just to, like, yeah, I'll eat barbecue with you, Ms. O'Hara.
I've got an idea. We'll talk about the barbecue the Wilkses are giving over 12 Oaks tomorrow.
That's a good idea. You're eating barbecue with us, aren't you, Scarlett?
Well, I haven't thought about that yet. I'll think about that tomorrow.
And we want all your waltzes. First Brent, then me, then Brent, then me again, then so on. Promise?
Well, I'd just love to. If only I didn't have every one of them taken already.
Well, honey, you can't do that to us.
How about if we tell you a secret?
Secret? Who about it?
Well, you know Miss Melanie Hamilton from Atlanta?
Ashley Wilkes' cousin? Well, she's visiting the Wilkes' at 12
Melanie
Oaks.
Hamilton, that goody-goody. Who wants to know a secret about her?
Well, anyway, we heard, that is, they say that...
Ashley Wilkes is gonna marry her. You know the Wilkes always marry their cousins.
Now, how do we get those waltzes?
Well, Ashley is driven by honor and practicality. Those are his two defining features. And a lot of this, one of the big themes in the film is, like, honor versus heart or emotion.
Mm-hmm.
Ashley's practicality is what brings him to his wife. And he says something to the effect of Ashley and Scarlett, that they were too different, and that's why they wouldn't work. So he needed to marry someone like him in order for that to work, which then sheds an interesting light on her and Rhett because they are so similar, but they still don't work. So if Scarlett can't be in a relationship that works because she'd be too different than the person, but she also can't have a successful relationship because she's too the same as that person, what is there for Scarlett?
And I think that's what the core of this movie, what it's really about. I read I've been reading up a little bit about, like, the history of Gone with the Wind, the novel, the production, and just theories about it. And this is one of the common themes that I hear is that Gone with the Wind was the perfect film for the type of film they were trying to make in 1939, where it has more in line with the Depression era flapper than it does with the Southern Belle, because characters like Scarlett O'Hara did not exist in the 1800s. It is more of a reflection of Margaret Mitchell, the author, and the type of life she was living than it did of anything else. And, I think the idea of, like, sexual freedom is kind of like one of the big themes of this book, where, like, Scarlett doesn't have a man that she loves the way that they love her, or vice versa, but that's never once stopped her. Like, the fact that the final frame of the movie is her pretty much pulling herself back up and, saying it in 1939 vernacular that nothing's gonna stop me. I'm going to keep moving on. And even after she married Rhett, the fact that she wanted to keep her business because it was something she was proud of, I think speaks a lot for the type of person that she is.
Yeah. And there's, that's also a reaction to the end of the first half of the film when she claims proudly that I'll never go hungry again. Everything in the second act the first half of the film and the second half of the film mirror each other in very, I'm sure intentional, but eerie ways, in that one of the main differences being in the first half of the film, she was doing everything in order to get Ashley. Yep. In the second half of the film, all of her motivation was being secure, having money, not letting the Yankees take her. I don't even know if independence is the right word, but her security.
It's self-preservation.
Yeah.
She realized that no man or person in general, like even her daughter, could make her happy the way that Tara made her happy.
Yeah. And she manipulates people in the same way in both halves in order to reach that goal that is different.
Yeah.
But I had started mentioning before kind of my summary, and we tangented off. So both Rhett and Scarlett, they covet people. They want to own people. In Scarlett's case, it's Ashley.
Yeah.
And Tara, but that's obviously a land. However, it's land with a title, with a name, so it's personified. Mm-hmm. And Rhett seeks to own Scarlett. They both, in a way, get what they want. When Scarlett owns the business, Ashley is her business partner. She always finds a way to keep Ashley in her life and have a modicum of control over his life, or some kind of heavy connection to it. So they own it. Rhett owns Scarlett. He owns his daughter. He even says when their daughter is born, this is the first person that I've ever truly owned.
Yeah, I caught that line, and I kind of just played it off as being like maybe a product of the time, but it's like I don't sit well with that line.
I think that's a reflection of their commentary on this Southern lifestyle and its connection to slavery and owning people.
Yeah.
They paint the Southern Belle plantation lifestyle in a really interesting way, where on the surface it's, oh, look at how great these poor Southerners on their plantations, and the Yankees are only seen as Sherman.
Yeah.
That's the only part of the northern forces that you see.
Well,
or is talked about.
Other than the robber later on in the film.
Oh yeah, sure. But it's certainly taking the worst bits of that and saying, all we're trying to do is live our nice, peaceful plantation, elegant lifestyles, and the Northerners are just trying to torture us, which is not the narrative that we get in our generation, and I'm sure it was true then too.
It's interesting though, like because they very much painted in the light of what they kind of ignore, maybe ignore is the wrong word, but they don't touch on the fact that the reason the Civil War was fought was over slavery. They play it more as we just don't want our way of life to be changed, and we all know that old quote, history's written by the winners.
Right.
So we always it's interesting in a way, because usually when we see a Civil War movie, the Southerners are always the one treated as like the evil villain. So it's kind of interesting to see a Southerners, because Margaret Mitchell is Southern, who was raised on stories of the Civil War. It's kind of interesting to see like her perspective on it. However, like I do love that like the Southern bias. Like there's that great scene where like the camera is moving past and showing all the dead bodies as it pulls out, and you see the Confederate flag. And apparently someone made a comment back when the movie came out that said, had we had that many soldiers during that actual war, we might have won. But it's interesting because beginning of the film, they're all like, you don't want to go to war, Scarlett? And just like this, they're all so like gung-ho to go to war. And then like war happens and they're like, we're not ready. We don't know what we're doing. And I just love that they kind of get their comeuppance and like they're slapped on the wrist and they're like, well, we got ourselves into this.
Right. But while you have the Southern author's take on all of this, she also, through Rhett and Scarlett, has this subtext commentary on kind of the foibles of trying to control and have power over people when they're not as invested in the relationship as you are.
Yeah.
When you're trying to get somebody else to do something for you because you want it, not because you collectively want it as a group. So I think there is some... It's not as pro-South as it seems on the surface.
Yeah, and I'm kind of touching back on like questionable content, because we can't talk this episode without eventually talking about the big elephant in the room when it comes to this movie and racism. And right. It's interesting because I did some reading, and apparently this is the film that eventually began changing the way that African Americans were portrayed in films. Not completely, because they still had a long road ahead of them, but some decisions were made, like David O. Selznick, which at the top of the episode I said it was David O. Selznick's production of Gone with the Wind. Not taking credit away from the director, but he was the only force throughout the entire process of this film that stayed on. This film went through 5 different directors or so because of exhaustion or being fired or various things, and David O. Selznick was
Scarlett whipped him one more time and he collapsed, foaming at the mouth.
Yeah, and did
she just kill the director?
He's the only one that stayed on, like so much so, since they were rewriting the script daily, there was no actual account of how the script actually was. And so in the editing room, they're like, we don't know what to do. We don't have a script to go off of. So Selznick's the only one that knew the story from beginning to end. So he was in the editing room assembling everything. So David
was the script.
Yeah, he was he was the creative force behind this film. And when they were casting a large amount of the black actors in this film, a lot of them felt very uncomfortable with the content, understandably. Like especially Butterfly McQueen, who played, I think it was Missy. She played like the more simpleton girl who don't know nothing about birth and no babies. She felt very uncomfortable with the type of role that she was playing. And David O. Selznick heard this, and to his own ability in 1939, did what he could to change some things. Like he removed any use of the N-word from the script.
Okay.
They have other equally as bad slurs, but it's a start, I guess. And he also removed any reference and any scenes that involve the Klan.
Okay.
Because he was trying to make their time on set a little, like, make them feel like they were characters even though they were very harsh stereotypes. So
Sure.
it's interesting. But like a couple years ago, maybe last year, I think it's New York critic Lou Lumenick he feels the film should be banned from any theatrical showings ever again, and if anything, it should only ever be seen in a museum because he feels it's that out of date. Which I wanted your opinion on, because I'm on a weird mindset where I get where he's coming from. It is out of date with its morals, but at the same time, I don't believe in banning films, banning books. I don't
Right.
believe in that, because I feel like everything, good or bad, is a time capsule.
Well, and I certainly can't speak to the intentions of the author or the filmmakers. I don't know what that was, but what I got out of the film, particularly this viewing, was the death of that lifestyle, the death of that, or at least the beginning of the end, that Scarlett's story paralleled the story of plantation life coming to an end. And in that context, I think, that's not necessarily a story to ban.
Yeah.
I certainly think that the way that it was colored, again, as we spoke about earlier, colored plantation life as harmless. Mm-hmm. There's a couple of shots in the beginning of them working in the fields, but then you get the scene right after the intermission where Scarlett and her sisters are picking cotton in order to keep Tara alive. So, no, I don't think it should be banned, and I agree with you that I don't think banning art accomplishes anything.
No, I think about... Oh, continue.
If it's a problematic piece of art, it should be kept available, but given historical context to say, yep, this is a sign of the times and it's problematic for this and this reason, and here's what we can learn from it. If you truly believe that a piece of art is insulting, problematic, out of touch, don't destroy it, don't hide it. Say, okay, this is a thing that a lot of people are aware of. Let's talk about it, discuss why it's a problem, so we can change the future.
No, exactly. It's like there's a lot of not references, but like it's hard to talk about Gone with the Wind without mentioning Birth of a Nation. D.W. Griffith's controversial film, and there is it's while Gone with the Wind I feel is a lot more subtly racist. Birth of a Nation is a lot more blatantly racist, extremely much so. But that being said, D.W. Griffith did, while making Birth of a Nation, did more for filmmaking than any other filmmaker had done at that point. It's the reason why, like, in film school, we still talk about the film, but they do give that historical context and pretty much say, like, this is not how any of us feel. Like, and I feel like that's how films like this should be treated. Like, I read an article a year or two ago where someone was trying to say that 16 Candles should also be banned because of questionable content. And I rewatched it, and the movie is kind of rapey, and it's homophobic at times. But I was talking to Amanda about this, and it's well, I can't necessarily speak for the voices of these of the minorities because I don't know what it's like or how these things feel. It's like once I said earlier, it's a time capsule. And if we were to, you don't have to like this movie, you don't have to respect this movie, you don't have to give this movie any two thoughts, but to ban it would almost give it more power because you are giving in to the people, incorrect thought, instead of saying like, no, we're not going to ban this film, but instead we're going to tell you why this movie is incorrect.
Right. Yep. And as you said, and I was about to give the same disclaimer, like that, it's really easy for me as like a straight white dude to talk about like what should and shouldn't be done with these pieces of art. But when it comes down to it, like I'm not the person who should be making that decision.
No.
I have like a broad idea of just art banning in general.
Yeah.
But I'm not the person to ask when it comes to should racist films be, what should become of those. I don't want to make that decision.
No.
It doesn't affect me like it does other people.
No, and I guess I kind of view it as such. Like if you ban anything that's questionable, one, you're closing yourself off to art, because art is supposed to challenge in some way. It shouldn't necessarily like hurt a person, but there should be some sort of challenging aspect to it. And by banning something, you are closing yourself off to a completely different mindset. Not saying you have to agree with that mindset, but it's the same way of like, in today's political climate, there's a lot of people I don't agree with on my Facebook. And if I were to block every single one of them and just live inside my little bubble, I'm cutting myself off from different opinions. Even if I don't agree with 90% of those other opinions, at least then I can see it.
Well, and you can understand if you take the time to understand the source of those ideas that you don't agree with, you can better argue your case or better define your side. I find that hearing somebody that agrees with me does really nothing to educate myself. When I hear somebody really smart who has a really dissenting opinion, like nothing clarifies my position more than that, because then I'm like, all right, well, why? It challenges me. Why do I think what I think? Mm-hmm. Does any of that change? And if it doesn't change, then it allows me to steel myself in that and figure out when I'm presented with this other, perspective, why do I think the way that I do? Why do I disagree with you? What information, what education do I need to get in order to figure out my perspective better?
Yeah. Well, damn, that was dense.
Yeah. And so now we should start talking about the film.
Yeah. My next two notes are kind of amusing because one of them is Scarlett is a twit. And then right after that, Rhett Butler, am I right? I don't even know what I meant when I wrote that, and I'm trying to decipher what the fuck I was. What's
the deal with Rhett Butler?
See, the thing that's difficult about Rhett Butler is, like you're saying, he's not a good person.
No, terrible. So, but he's so fucking he
charming.
Knows who he is.
Yeah,
and he's not manipulative. Scarlett's very manipulative. Rhett will come out and say, "I'm a terrible person."
Yeah,
or I'm a self-interested person. I don't do anything for honor. I do everything for me.
Yeah, he spends most of his time at a whorehouse, and he's a blockade runner for hire. So any side that pays him more, he'll go and help.
Right.
But the fact that he's so very honest about his dishonesty, almost in
honor amongst thieves,
in a strange way, kind of gives him a pass. It's kind of like I've been referring to it as the Captain Jack Sparrow mentality. Captain Jack Sparrow is a criminal, a crook, a terrible person, but yet everyone loves him because he's open about the fact that he's a terrible person.
I'm Captain Jack Sparrow.
Pirates.
And Clark Gable is a charming man.
Yeah.
My uncle, who I guess preface in saying is gay, he had the hugest crush on Clark Gable. Whenever we were watching Turner Classic Movies, he would put a Clark Gable movie on. And now thinking back about it, the way that my uncle styled his mustache and everything just seemed very Clark Gable-ish. Now that I'm thinking about it,
he has too many teeth for my taste. He smiles, and it's like, how do you fit all those teeth in there?
From what I heard, they did a lot of work on him, so I wouldn't be surprised if they'd put extra teeth in him. When he came to Hollywood, he was scrawny, had no facial hair, had a high-pitched voice.
We have the technology.
That's actually one of the more interesting scandals of this film. Have you heard about any of the scandals behind this film?
No.
Well, there's a lot of director changes. Victor Fleming is the one who actually gets the credits. Hold on, I'm scrolling down so I can see names. My computer's being kind of slow, so give me a second. Victor Fleming is the one that gets the credit. But a filmmaker by the name of George Cukor is the one that started on the film. And they shot, I think someone said that like there might be 4 solid reels left of his work in the actual film, which for a film this big is not that much.
Right.
But he directed a lot of these chamber pieces, as I keep calling them. It's a bunch of people sitting around talking. He was the women on set loved him. He had a great feel for that, women talking, and but he was taking so long. He was a good friend of David O. Selznick, but things were just taking too long. They weren't agreeing on a lot, and they're behind schedule. But Clark Gable was good friends with Victor Fleming because he had worked on a lot of westerns and war pictures, so they thought, let's bring him on. Maybe he'll have a different take on a lot of this, much to the chagrin of a lot of the female cast because they felt protected and safe under Cukor. But that's what the documentaries had to say.
Right.
If you look at kind of like, and that documentary was made in 1988, so it's like it hadn't like revealed a lot of the seedy underbelly of things. The reason I also heard that George Cukor was fired, George Cukor was gay. And it was pretty well documented that he was gay. And I cannot remember the name of another filmmaker in Hollywood who was gay, but they're good friends, and they'd come on set. Not good friends in that way, like they rolled in the same circles. How do I put this nicely? Clark Gable also knew these two men, and Clark Gable wasn't completely straight from what I've read from the beginning of his career. He was a womanizer in the worst possible way and a terrible drunk. When he first came to Hollywood, he'd shack up with wealthy older women for their money, and then keep sleeping around. And but he would essentially fool around with anyone. And he had a relationship for a while with this other filmmaker, this guy, and he helped Clark Gable create his new aesthetic, help him with his facial hair, helped him create a new voice and become a better actor and a more formidable presence. And apparently the way that the rumors go, that Cukor was talking to this other filmmaker, which I wish I could find the name of, and someone had joked around that, Cukor hired one of your former tricks. Gable heard this, was furious, and talked to David O. Selznick, because Gable didn't want to do this film originally and said it's either him or me. Okay. So they got rid of Cukor. So that's the seedier version of that story.
Drama.
Because, he didn't want anyone to know about him playing for both teams.
It's a different time.
Mm-hmm. So there's that. That's like one of the more infamous stories about this movie. And I was talking to my mom about this movie because this is one of her favorites. And I was telling her, and she was like, Cukor was fired because he wasn't a manly enough director. And I'm smirking to myself. It's like, that's not the only reason. And she's like, what do you mean? It's like, Cukor and Clark Gable recognized each other from the same clubs. And she's like, what kind of clubs? It's like, Cukor was gay. It's like, Clark Gable wasn't gay, was he? And she got really offended. I was like, no. And I told her a different version of the story.
But that reaction kind of demonstrates, and this was even earlier, but that the requirement that these leading men needed to portray that generation's idea of manliness and masculinity. That especially because gay clubs were illegal at
the time in Hollywood. If you were caught in one, we'd be arrested. So, like, it's not surprising to have to keep it secret. But, like, I also don't think that Clark Gable was necessarily completely gay. Like, he had a lot of famous relationships with other women. So I always just kind of imagine he just, you know, whoever he was attracted to that day.
Right.
But, yeah, that like I said, this film went through a lot of, like, I touched on it a little bit. There's a lot of issues with this film. You know, because originally it was David O. Selznick trying to get this movie made with a script by Sidney Howard, which the script, if made, would have been 5 hours long. And he's like, no, wait, that is way too long. And like,
let's trim it back an hour.
Let's like trim it back like an hour and a half and see what we got there. And Sidney rewrote it and had it 15 pages longer. Like you do. And apparently everyone who worked on this film like was losing their mind, where someone would turn a draft in and then escape town just so they couldn't take any calls. It was becoming nuts. And like Victor Fleming, who took over directing of the film, he things went crazy for him as well, and he eventually got like terrible anxiety and left the film for like a week or two and went on vacation. And a filmmaker by the name of Sam Wood took over, and he was directing. And then Victor Fleming heard how good of a job he was doing. It's like, no, this can't be. And he came back and powered through it. So like there's there's 5 directors in this film, 4 screenwriters, 3 cinematographers, and 2 editors. Normally today, if you would hear about this happening, you're like, oh, this film is doomed. There's no way this film's going to work. And especially because the script is being rewritten every single day. No one knew what they were doing. And it's now considered one of the greatest films of all time. Like, David O. Selznick must have sold his soul to the devil to get this film done.
Well, and it's you could certainly make a case for, like, nowadays chunking that into 2 films. It was 4 hours long with a very natural break in the middle.
Yeah.
Where each one with probably a little bit of tweaking could easily, you know, everybody loves their sequels nowadays.
Yeah, you could have made a whole series of Gone with the Wind films.
Yeah.
No, I don't think anyone would want to see that. Not in today's world, anyways.
One of the things that, like, most of the character stuff, I got a lot out of, but made sense. One big question mark that still hangs in my head: why did Rhett sign up for the Army? And he speculates on this too. He tells you right up front, everything he does is for self-interest. Everything he does is for Rhett Butler. But then he decides to join up in the Army, and he says, I don't know, maybe I'm feeling guilty, he throws out a couple of options, but it's never really answered.
No, it's really strange too, because like at first I thought it was just an excuse to leave the situation. But all of a sudden he just got this insatiable need to do his civic duty. And the only thing I can think of is to see the burning of Atlanta and see all these people suffering for, you know, and joining up with the team that he knows is going to lose to maybe help them out.
Yeah, he says maybe I just have a thing for lost causes once they're truly lost, and maybe therein lies the answer, because we've already established that Scarlett perhaps wants things simply because she can't have them.
Yeah.
And so maybe this is his way of saying, guess what, now you can't have... If he suspects this, then, and he goes off to war, now you can't have me, so that she'll want him. Maybe in his mind, this is the only way that he thinks he can get her.
Yeah, and maybe I'm giving too much credit to his character, because like now that even when I'm about to say it, this doesn't even sound like it's logical for what he would do. he left her at a time when she was at her lowest. When, especially because she's probably only it was only probably like 18 years old or so.
Then she was 16 or 17.
She was 16 or 17 at the beginning, so maybe I don't know how much time had passed, but she was still really young and had not lived any sort of life outside of perfection. And he's pretty and he doesn't even he knows it's stupid to go back to Tara, but she wants to do it. And I feel like in his own way, he's like, well, if you want to go back, then you've got to deal with what you're going to find, and I'm not going to be there to pick you up afterwards. If you want to go back there, you've got to deal with this on your own. So I feel like it gave him an out as well to leave. And because in that montage, and it's not even a montage, I guess that's the wrong word, but in that sequence of her getting back to Tara, she grew up a lot.
Yeah. Well, and I think one of the flaws in the thinking of Rhett leaving because he wouldn't support her in that way is there's a reoccurring theme of when these people fall in love with somebody else, I would do anything for you. That line is said, I think 4 or 5 times I caught it. But I would do anything. I love you so much, I would do anything for you. And Rhett, until the very last scene, would do anything for her.
Yeah.
And tells, is it Millie, that at one point in the third act, or fifth, depending on the 27th act in this movie.
Yeah.
Towards the end. If I knew there was a chance, if I thought that there was any chance that someday she would stop loving Ashley, then I would wait till the ends of the earth, because I would do anything for her. And I think when she was going back to Tara, he would do anything for her then.
Yeah, probably. It's interesting though. Like one thing I paid attention to, and I appreciate it too, because like one of the earlier scenes when Rhett and Scarlett were dancing, he says, "I just want you to say to me what you said to Ashley that day, and that you love me." And she's like, "You're never gonna hear that," and
he does.
Yeah. And it's
a day too late.
Yeah, and I love that. I'm glad that they held it off until that very last scene.
Yeah.
Because then he doesn't get
like nobody gets, like, everybody is miserable by the end of this movie. and I say by the end, everybody is miserable throughout the entire movie.
Yeah.
It's just a series of, I want this, but it's torn away from me. I want this, but I'll never have it. That every character.
And like seriously, Rhett's lucky he got out when he did, or else the horses would have come and killed him like they did her 2 other husbands.
Right. Maybe that's going to be the sequel.
They made a sequel.
Revenge of the Stallions. They did.
It's called Scarlett. It's called Scarlett.
Oh, I'll have to watch that and see what the horses do.
It wasn't it's based on a book which wasn't written by Margaret Mitchell, and they made it into a movie. I don't know. My mom has seen it, but I don't know what she thought about it. But no, it's good. Yeah. I think we should make a threequel and have it be about horses.
There you go.
It should be a Scarlet Stallion, and there's one horse that has like red blood across its face because it's coming after Scarlet. Right. It's got her father's blood on him.
Always looking at her through a window.
I do have to say, like, I understand his motivation behind it, but I was really amused that, like, not amused that the child died. That was sad because it really caught me off guard. But I was amused by the line afterwards that he went out and shot that horse in the head. It's like the horse didn't do anything.
Didn't it, Michael? Didn't it?
Your daughter's the one who wasn't listening and trying to jump while riding side saddle.
Well, if that horse wasn't a vengeful jerk. Something that I really enjoyed about the movie too was their use of color.
Yes.
And they used green, and a lot with Scarlett's outfits too, but green to represent her envy and her jealousy. They used red to represent her passion and at least emotional adultery.
Yeah. There's
another scene where everybody is wearing black, except for Rhett, who comes in a fancy white linen suit, the white hat, like everybody black except Rhett coming in there.
Of course. Like,
so
that's how it works.
Or when Scarlett is so overwhelmed by being the nurse in the Civil War hospital, she like just it's the only time that she is drab. It's all like light browns head to toe as she leaves the hospital. But I really enjoyed what they did there.
No, I did too, and a lot of that comes down to the way it was shot. Are you very familiar with 3-strip Technicolor?
No. I found the Technicolor beautiful, but in terms of the
how 3-strip Technicolor
process
works, because this is like the pinnacle of Technicolor. And that's the reason the colors pop so much, is because it really focuses on primary colors. So how 3-strip Technicolor works, I don't know, maybe they have a video online somewhere where like we could pop in and like show people how it works. But how it works is the cameras were huge and bulky, and because it was rolling 3 strips of black and white film through the camera at all times and shooting the same image, and each one would run past a colored prism that would tint the film that color, and this strip would pick up would be green, this one would be red, and I think the other one was yellow. I think those green, red, and yellow. I think those are the 3 colors. I could be wrong. And essentially, with those 3 colors, you could pick up everything. So they run through the 3 films. They put it through a dye process, mix it together. I don't quite know how all that part is done. And then it comes out with these gloriously beautiful images where those 3 colors specifically really pop. And the thing about Technicolor is it was such a finicky process where Technicolor actually if you wanted to use the Technicolor process, that you had to agree to their terms, and their terms were they would have a supervisors on set, one person whose job was to work with the set designers and could veto any colors or color schemes they feel we're not gonna work with the Technicolor process. And then they also had someone who worked with the cinematographer, especially if they've never worked on color features before, and if they weren't happy with their work, could fire them.
Wow.
And one thing, and they also have to use 3 times as much light to make these films work.
Sure.
And what's interesting though about watching it is I was amazed, and I told Amanda this. It's like their use of darkness and shadow is so well. It's like I described it to her, and she hasn't seen as many black and white movies, but you might get this. It's shot like a black and white movie in color.
Right. Like Citizen Kane would be. A lot of use of cookies, silhouette, like you said, dark scene with this just like half of their face illuminated enough to see it.
Like the scene where Melanie was giving birth, and like it's all through silhouette with the light coming through like the shutters, or that scene, that very questionable potentially rape scene where Rhett picks up Scarlett and he walks off into darkness.
Right. Just very theater-esque of the the darkness representing the unknown and the frightful.
Yeah, like, and I just, that was the biggest thing I took away from this movie. It was like this movie is technically brilliant, and it's even better so like realizing that this movie created the idea that we'll fix it in post. Because there's so many times where they're making a scene and they didn't have enough of like enough money to shoot a set or something, so like that scene where Rhett builds Scarlett a new house and they're walking into it, the whole house is a painting. The only shot they could get was the actors walking into the studio in costume, and then they just painted everything around it. Like they used so much matte painting on this film to extend things. None of the sets had ceilings. Okay. None of the sets had ceilings. They're all painted in to save on money. And
awesome.
Or like they would repurpose scenes. The burning of Atlanta, they just burned old sets. They burned the big gate from the original King Kong.
Something about that reminded me of the scene in The Simpsons when they're filming the Radioactive Man movie and they're painting the horses.
Oh, sir, why don't you just use real cows?
Cows don't look like cows on film. You gotta use horses.
What do you do if you want something that looks like a horse?
Usually we just tape a bunch of cats together.
One of the things I wanted to talk about, continuing on with the idea of the movie being technically brilliant, is, I just love the use of the rear screen projection. Like, that was a very clever way to do a lot of what they're trying to get done. The fact that, like, the production designer, William Cameron Menzies, much of this film's success comes to him because he's the one who did all those matte paintings and figured out the way, and he storyboarded the entire film from beginning to end in advance, and this was one of the first times that was done. So he's one of the unsung heroes of this film. I guess the couple other things I wanted to discuss were a quote I read by Roger Ebert, which I'll get to in a moment. And then, like, I love, I want to talk about that famous line, "Frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn." Because it was one of those lines I grew up knowing, but I never knew the context of.
Right.
So, like, Amanda was saying that's, like, I just kind of assumed that was something he said right before they made love, because I just assumed this was some, like, big sweeping romance. And then we watched, it was like, wow, he just used this as a way to say F you, Scarlett, essentially.
Right.
And they went through so much crap to get that line used, because you weren't allowed to say damn in a movie back then. So, like, they had to fight the ratings board.
Couldn't show bathrooms, couldn't show two people in the same bed together, couldn't say damn. No fun.
No.
How did anything good get made until we have our new liberal ideas of...
No clue.
But yeah, clearly the most famous line, though there are several, that one's got to be the most iconic, and it certainly represents Rhett's change, because he's, again, with that I would do anything for you, Scarlett attitude of I want to own you, I want to possess you, and finally he gives up and says, you know what, I'm out.
Yeah.
Even before, when he left and he was giving her divorce papers, it wasn't, I'm leaving you, it's that I'm recognizing that I can't have you in the way that I want you. Where at the end, it's like, I don't care that you love me. I'm done. I'm washing my hands of all of this. Again, he was an ass. I don't want to paint him as like, oh, he finally got out of this abusive... No. He just went back to being 100% selfish rather than 95% selfish.
He went back to the booze and the hookers.
Right. Though there was that great scene with, God, what was the harlot's name? The woman that ran the
Betsy?
burlesque house.
Beverly?
It's a B word. Bipsy.
Starts with an S. So swummy, slippy, slappy, slimming, Swanson?
Maybe it's on the briefcase. Look on the...
Oh, yeah! It's right here. Samsonite. I was way off. I knew it started with an S, though.
Where they set up this foil of her and Scarlett, of you two are really similar. Rhett tells her, you two are really similar, except you have heart.
Yeah.
And there's regularly they're talking about people's honor and whether or not honor is important, and they show all of the gentlemen in the beginning acting very gentlemanly and southernly, and then they ask Rhett what he thinks of the war.
Sure, I might offend a few of the blue noses with my cocky stride and musky odors. Oh, I'll never be the darling of the so-called city fathers who cluck their tongues, stroke their beards, and talk about what's to be done with this Homer Simpson.
Kind of says I'm sorry, I'm not a gentleman, I'm going to excuse myself. But so that there's that theme of do you or do you not have honor, and do you or do you not have heart. And it seems that both Scarlett and Rhett have neither.
Yeah.
Where everybody else in the film at least has one of those two things, and they're played against each other.
Mm-hmm. I don't have a whole...
what
are you going to say?
There's one more thing at the end that I one of my little quirks that I caught when Millie is dying, and her son Bo, I believe, once is upset, and it's morning, and he doesn't want, and Ashley's taking him to bed, and he says, "I don't want to go to bed." He's upset about his mom being sick, and he says, "I don't want to go to bed. It's morning." And the dad said, "It isn't really morning yet." And clearly the double entendre of mourning, that they're about to be mourning, but it's not here yet. She is on her deathbed.
Yeah, I thought that was...
she hasn't yet died.
That was a really clever use of wordplay, and I think like the main screenwriter for this film, he was a theater, right? He wrote for a lot for theater and did a lot of Shakespeare adaptations and everything.
Very and you could, Shakespearean wordplay.
And you could kind of see that. I was gonna say I don't have a whole lot more other than a quote that I found that I feel like kind of sums up. Sums up Gone with the Wind pretty nicely, unless you got something else.
No, I don't think so. I have lots. I have pages and pages of notes, but I think we covered the spirit of what is in all of it.
Once again, I need to get a lot better at remember
finding the name of who you're quoting.
Give me 1 second, and I will find out who this person was. I'll just cut all this dead air out because I feel really bad that I never write down source names. I get excited and I write it down, and then I forget. But I remember what I searched on Google when I found it. So, it's actually CNN.
Nice.
And now I remember why I didn't write it down, because the website kind of froze my computer for a second. It's all right. So here's a quote by Todd Leopold about Gone with the Wind that I felt like this summed it up very nicely. If you depend on movies for a clean, uncluttered, and accurate view of history, you'll be disappointed every time. Leave the history to the historians. Movies are storytelling, and few stories are told as well as Gone with the Wind. As Roger Ebert noted in 1998, it's still a towering landmark of film, quite simply because it tells a good story and tells it wonderfully well. And I feel like that's Gone with the Wind.
Yeah. In a nutshell.
Yeah. Before we wrap up for the day, though, I've got some obligations that I need to get out the way. Where we got to talk about my mom's other favorite film, Psycho Cop Returns. No, it's not really her other favorite film. I just love that we're pairing Gone with the Wind and Vinegar Syndrome's release of Psycho Cop Returns.
A lot of similarities.
Yes.
There's a lot of synergy here.
However, I think if I can convince you to buy any title, Nick, from Vinegar Syndrome, or maybe I'll lend you my copy and just mail it over. It'll be this one.
Okay.
Psycho Cop Returns is a comedy horror film directed by Riff Coogan, the nom de plume of filmmaker Adam Rifkin, best known for Detroit Rock City. There's not much story, but what I can tell you is it's the slasher version of Die Hard.
Nice. Okay.
A group of guys decide to throw a bachelor party in the high-rise they work in after hours, like you do, and a satanic police officer shows up to punish them.
Wonderful.
So you can see all the similarities already of Gone with the Wind.
Right. Yeah.
There's some great things about it. One of the animators for The Simpsons, he wrote it. So it's got a great sense of humor. It's a crazy film, and I feel like it'd be great for an audience. Bob Vance from The Office. If you watch The Office at all.
British or American?
American.
Bob Vance.
He what's the
Yes. Yep.
The one woman.
The husband.
Yeah. He's Psycho Cop. And he delivers all of his lines like Plastic Santa from the Santa Claus 2.
Up late, couldn't sleep. Milk wouldn't do it. Cocoa was a little sweet, so I decided to make an army of toy soldiers.
So if you've seen the Santa Claus 2 of Tim Allen, when he creates Plastic Santa,
what an interesting stew of references you've just created.
Well, I realize we've had no references to this entire episode because it's been a very dry, studious episode, so I thought I should throw them all in right now. The film was made in a week, and it was trying its hardest to make the next Freddy Krueger. I loved this movie. It's not particularly well made. It's being a little harsh. It's made as well as it could be in a week for its budget.
Yeah, I was just going to say, for a week, I'm assuming feature length.
It's not a whole lot of story to it, and it's a lot of running around the high rise, and as the Psycho Cop comes and kills them all. And if you look up the description for the original Psycho Cop, which you don't need to see to enjoy this film, it says a satanic police officer makes comments as he kills teenagers, because everything he says, he's got a terrible pun with. Let me see if I can pull up the quotes for Psycho Cop 2, because everything he says is a pun. Like, I hate to kick a man when he's dead. They just don't put up much of a fight. Or there's a great one. He throws a woman off of the high rise and she lands into a trash can. And his line is, "If you act like trash, you get treated like trash." And of course, when he kills these two people having sex, he of course has the great confusing line, "I'm beginning to suspect foreplay."
Police Officer Joe Vickers, at your service.
Whatever you do.
Here's Joey.
Don't call 911. Just run.
I hate to kick a man when he's dead. They just don't put up much of a fight.
Everything about this movie just amused the hell out of me and Amanda. And there's a pretty good making of documentary on the disc as well, where they talk to the filmmakers and the actors and everything, and just talk about how fun it was to make this film, but then also just about the indie spirit that went into it. Because Adam Rifkin, he was trying to make real films at the time too, but he thought, how often as a filmmaker do you get to practice your craft? You don't. Sure. So he said, if I make low budget, horror films for direct to VHS that have nudity and blood, it gives me an excuse to direct, and it doesn't hurt me because I'm using a fake name. Right. So it just talks about everything that went into making this movie in a week, and it just seemed like it was kind of nightmarish, not nearly as much as Gone with the Wind, but he had fun because it didn't matter whether or not the film turned out well.
Pressure was off.
And here's the greatest line in cinema history. This is gonna take precedence over "Frankly, My Dear, I Don't Give a Damn."
Okay, and I'm bracing myself.
And it's delivered by Psycho Cop Joe Vickers. "You have the right to remain dead. Anything you say can and will be used. Anything you say can and will be considered very strange because you're dead. You have the right to an attorney, but it won't do you any good because you're dead. Do you understand these rights that have been read to you? Are you even listening? It would be a lot easier if you would be a little more cooperative." The best part about that...
And mic drop.
"Anything you say can and will be considered very strange because you're dead." The actor that plays him, he says in the making of, it's I can't remember what I had for breakfast this morning, but I'll never forget that line. So
you want me to say what now?
So that's Psycho Cop Returns. It's a lot of fun. It's that's honestly the best way I can describe it is it's the slasher film version of Die Hard.
Yeah, that's all winning right there.
It is some of the most fun I have had recently. And considering I just watched a couple really long movies, I just watched Gone with the Wind, and then right after that I decided to watch Rear Window, which was amazing.
Yeah, that's a good one.
And so I was like, you know what? I'm feeling like I need some Psycho Cop Returns in my life.
It's a palate cleanser.
Yeah. So right now, that is out of Vinegar Syndrome's entire line, that is the one that gets my my seal of approval, and would make a great accompaniment to Gone with the Wind.
Again, a lot of synergy.
If anything, watch the first half of Gone with the Wind. When the intermission comes up, watch Psycho Cop Returns, and then watch
Shake it out. Yep.
Watch the second half of Gone with the Wind. Make it a day of it. You're gonna have to.
Best double feature ever.
Yes. But anyways, that's what all I've got. Did you have any suggestions for me, or are we just gonna wrap it up a little? I don't want to say early because it's kind of a long episode.
I did not prepare. I put so much energy into Gone with the Wind notes that that I was overwhelmed to the point of not doing any recommendations.
Same.
And to be fair, our Shameless, we right now have enough content to record this show for like 27 years.
Yeah.
At our current rate of watching. So I think we're okay, but I liked it as a feature.
No,
so.
I do too. I don't think I got any more else. I feel like I'm gonna need to step away from Gone with the Wind for a while after this. Like after watching a 4-hour movie and then 2.5 hours of making of and reading countless essays, it's gonna be a while before I revisit this film again. I've kind of made the rule that unless I can see it on the big screen, I'm probably not gonna watch it for a very long time.
Frankly, Michael, I don't give a damn.
I was wondering when that was going to come in.
I was waiting for the right moment.
But real quick before we finish for the day, since this is my mother's favorite movie, I sat down with her the other day. I brought a recorder to her house, and I conducted a little interview with my mother, and to find out why Gone with the Wind is her favorite movie. And we had a lot of fun, and it was once she got warmed up. It was a really good conversation, so
cool.
Here's that. Test. Do you want to say something, just so I can see if you're going through?
I love Gone with the Wind.
All right, that worked, and it's plenty loud enough. All right, I am sitting here with my mom, Mary, on this special Mother's Day episode of the Shameless Picture Show. And since Gone with the Wind is her favorite movie, or at least that's what she always told me growing up, I thought I'd talk to her for a couple minutes and get an idea of why. So, you said Gone with the Wind, like throughout my childhood was one of, if not your favorite movie of all time. Mm-hmm. Can you elaborate on why a little bit? To the best of your ability.
I think it's just the fact that it's an epic movie, it's history, not so much even the love story, but just the fact that it shows the change over a span of many years, and movies like that intrigue me, and to me Gone with the Wind was just one of my favorites.
And I believe it spent quite a bit of time, because I believe when the book and movie began, Scarlett was only like 16 years old, and I think by the end of it, she's 38.
Yeah.
Getting up there in age. When was the first time you saw it, if you can remember?
I would think probably middle school.
Probably on TV.
Most likely, yes.
Now, middle school, that was about the 70s for you, right?
Mm-hmm.
Did you have a color TV?
Yes. So
you got to see it in its full color, because Gone with the Wind is known for its vibrant use of color, because it was used with the three strip Technicolor process. Do you know anything about that?
Yes.
How did it work? Since the movie's a 4-hour movie with an intermission, intro, and outro music, like how did it must have been an event, like.
Oh yeah, I mean movies like that, they would have it like 2-3 nights. It would be like a mini series. So they couldn't show it all one night. And, there weren't DVRs back then. There weren't, anything to record. So if you wanted to watch a movie, you had to be in front of the TV to watch it. There was no way to pause TV back then. So
like they'd show it in half hour increments.
Probably, I would say probably like 2 hours. But then again, there'd probably be commercials, on regular local channels. So they probably put it on probably 2 to 3 nights, I would assume.
Well, Nick, I can honestly say that this episode is now Gone with the Wind.
Oh. I'm gonna need so many drum like rim shot sound effects in this episode, which I expected with it being Gone with the Wind. A lot of bad puns and.
And especially that we paired it with Psycho Cop 2.
I mean, what else would you pair it with?
That's the through line right there. Is bad puns. I think that's all you need.
Yep.
All right.
I concur.
All right, Nick. I think this is one of our longer episodes. My runtime is 1:19 before we cut stuff out. So,
nice. Though we were at what 122 for In the Mouth of Madness, I think.
Yeah, but like once we put
one of them was real.
Once we put my mom in, it'll all.
Well, yeah.
This is definitely the denser of the episodes, and this will be one that probably has very few sound bites other than maybe from the actual movie.
This was like all content. There's no fluff in this episode.
No, and I rely on fluff to keep these episodes going.
Right. I mean, we're not entertaining. It's all of our cutaways that do the entertaining for us.
People listen to our episodes for Freddy's Dead references.
For things they could just watch on YouTube.
Yeah, but instead they're like, oh, I want to hear what Michael and Nick are going to say about Freddy's Dead, or about Butch Patrick, or about killer horses.
I want to write an entire essay now about how Gone with the Wind is just about a murderous band of revenge horses.
I want to make a short film based on that. I want to make it everything it's Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are dead, but instead of Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, what the horses were doing during all these scenes.
Totally.
I almost made this is audio and you can't see it. Nick almost choked on his coffee.
Well, they can watch it on the YouTubes.
On the YouTubes.
Yep.
Oh, you sound so YouTubes. I can't even think of you sound like George Carlin doing a skit.
Yeah, well, it's the deep Chicago accent. Have 2-3 brats in an old style kind of super fans doubles.
Now I want a brat. Damn you.
They're so delicious.
I know.
Okay. All right.
But this is probably real quick. I think the last thing I need to ask you before this show is over.
Okay.
How are the brats in Maryland?
Well, I actually was always a big fan of Johnsonville, which I'm pretty sure is a Wisconsin brand, and we have those out here. Though the best ones are always going to come from like the kind of places where somebody sticks an open flag out on their front porch, and then you pull down their driveway into their shed, and like half of a pig is hanging upside down in a dusty, unsanitary place, but the flavors are off the hook.
No, it tastes like swine and sawdust.
Yeah. But we don't have those out here. When you see that sign and you pull into somebody's shady driveway, it's crabs and oysters.
That's good to know.
Yeah.
All right.
So come on down to the Eastern Shore.
Oh, we're hoping to at some point.
Yes.
Not gonna be right away, but we'll plan on it. But I feel like that's all we got.
I think so. All right. We'll see you next time. Until then, let us know what you're watching. Let us know what's on your shame lists. I'm eager to see how it compares against ours.
Yeah, and as always, like and rate us on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher Radio, SoundCloud. Just share us. Do anything. Just let us know that you are listening. Like we appreciate the private messages saying how much you like our show, but post something on the page.
Don't be ashamed. Don't let us be on your shame list.
Ooh, I feel like that's how we're gonna end this.
Nice.
All right.
Bye
bye.
Peace out.